Donald Trump, his style is very confrontational, very blunt, direct, and I think that's shone a light on some of the really hostile policies that we have in South Africa.
I think this is an important point that you mentioned earlier, sort of in passing, about help from abroad as opposed to what we can do internally. And in especially the last few months, and the last few years, I was very involved with international reaching out and so forth. But I do think that this is an important point. What can other countries do as opposed to what should we do ourselves? And I think one part of the answer is at least that there are actually very few that other countries can do, at least in creating a long-term sustainable solution, because most of that has to come from ourselves. But pressure can be applied in terms of policies and pressure against destructive policy ideas and pressure in favor of more sustainable policy ideas. But at the end of the day, most of the solution has to come from internal solutions. How do you see that balance between the two?
Yeah, look, I think we need to seek out forms of leverage. So when the Trump administration points out that the emperor has no clothes in South Africa and criticizes expropriation without compensation and race-based laws, we have 142 race-based laws in this country. This is research courtesy of Martin van Staden, again, who I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
He did that project for the Institute of Race Relations, but I think has had enormous impact on raising awareness around the extent of the racialization of policy in South Africa. But when the Trump administration points out these problems and also seeks to exercise leverage against us, I think we should actually welcome that. I think it's been a bit disappointing that people in the media and other political parties have, sort of kind of had a negative response to what the Trump administration has been saying. They're saying, we won't be bullied, and
misinformation is the new buzzword. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, if you had to look at that statement, that executive order from, when was it, the 6th of February, there's nothing there that is factually incorrect.
Yes.
So, I think we need to welcome that. I mean, obviously we want to make sure we preserve the interests of South Africans. But the interests of South Africans is often different to the interests of the South African government.
Yes.
Those two things are often at odds with one another. So I think it's concerning when tariffs, for example, could potentially impact citrus exporters or motor manufacturing exporters. But we also need to say, okay, well, how can we use this moment to build pressure internally for change? And I think, in the absence of for example, the GNU has come with its own internal contradictions.
Yes.
It's sometimes meant that certain criticism has been softened. The business community in South Africa, they've been playing a cautious game. They don't want to necessarily stick their necks above the parapet and criticize things like BE and EWC. They'll sort of take a wait-and-see approach. And so often that kind of reluctance to overtly criticize can actually reinforce bad policy, and over the course of time you have this slow decline. Whereas rightly or wrongly, Donald Trump, his style is very confrontational, very blunt, direct, and I think that's shone a light on some of the really hostile policies that we have in South Africa. So I think we should embrace that moment and say, okay, well, actually, how can we create something constructive out of this?
Yeah.
And I think I was greatly encouraged to see the likes of AfriForum, Solidarity. The DA also sent delegation to Washington, D.C., so did the business community.
Yep.
So I think we should be exploiting those channels of communication and also of influence to our advantage.
And I think just to